All right, we're going live, man. We'll give it a few seconds, but yeah, I've been an admirer. I don't remember. I reached out to you the first day that I saw your stuff, but yeah, I've been an admirer because like I said, even if I didn't agree with it, you can tell that a lot of time and work and energy has been put into your work.
Sure.
But all right, for everybody joining us, this is your man James, smart guy, and I am joined by a very, very, very special guest. I saw his work a few months ago on Twitter. Somebody had shared it. Angelo, and if you are not following him on Twitter, you are absolutely missing out. I've got his Twitter scrolling down there at the bottom at Angelo_fantasy, and also got his website. I mean, his website is absolutely phenomenal, man. I appreciate you joining us tonight, man.
No, man, I appreciate you having me on, man. Thanks for reaching out. I'm excited to be here.
So, I mean, I've been doing a little bit of reading. So, you grew up in Chicago, is that right?
I did, yeah, man. I still live
Okay.
here. So I grew up in the Chicago suburbs. My wife and I went to high school together out here too. So high school sweethearts. But yeah,
Okay.
we both live in the city. So it's fun being a Bears fan, but also just painstaking at times. But man, yeah, I work in sport, human performance. So I do a lot of work with athletes and coaches and practitioners. So for me, I'm kind of like a teacher, man. I just, I try to teach human movement. I was an athlete myself. I was a sprinter at a Big Ten school. So, for me, I got to run against some pretty fast dudes, which has been awesome in my career field too, looking back and reflecting on all of that. So, but yeah, man, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
I think you might have undersold yourself a little bit because, I mean, from what I'm reading, you were a four-time All-American and four-time conference champ.
Oh God, yeah. So back in the day, I tell you, man, walking up the stairs hurts now, but yeah, we had some skates back in the day. So I'm not gonna lie, but not as much anymore. I gotta start hitting up some rec leagues and stuff so we can use the wheels a bit. But no, man, that was a fun time in my career, man. I look back on that and just really blessed to be in that position to compete against some really, really quick dudes like Tyreek Hill, Justin Gatlin, like Wallace Spearman, those cats, man. I mean, just an absolute blast being on that level with them.
So Tyreek's not that fast, right? I mean, you've
No,
seen him in
man,
person.
no, he's not. No, it's funny, man, because I raced him when I was competing for like the U.S. junior national team to go to Worlds. And man, like everything that you hear about Tyreek Hill being the fastest man in the NFL, he's the fastest NFL player of all time. Like he beat me when he was in high school. I was coming out of my freshman year in college, and he's whooped my ass. Like I'll be straight up. But I mean, he's got some special speed, dude. I mean, he's a phenomenal football player too. He's developed into one of the best receivers in the game today. But his speed is as up close and personal as I got, man. His speed is legitimate as it gets.
So tell me a little bit about your work and like how you got started in this, man.
Man, okay. So I got started kind of in 2019 during that draft class. I was researching a ton of prospects and I actually reached out on Twitter to a couple guys that wrote some articles on David Montgomery. And I was, Dynasty FF Kyle, I believe it is. And I liked his article on David Montgomery. So I reached out to him like, man, like I like what you're saying. And I kind of gave my input. And I'm a big nerd, as you guys listening. And James, you probably understood that pretty quick. I'm a huge nerd in terms of terminology, all that stuff. So, I was chopping up with him. He's like, man, that's cool perspective. And then, I started just watching some more prospects in that year's class because, I played Dynasty too. So I had a couple early second round picks in one of my Dynasty and Devy leagues. So, I was checking those guys out. But yeah, it came down to it. Like I love sharing information. So I decided I was sitting at my in-laws house one day, got home from work and no one was home. So I was hanging out with them for the week. And I'm like, man, I might as well just do it. Might as well make a Twitter account. I wasn't a big social media guy before really. So made the Twitter account. Yeah, and that was kind of history. Made the brand logo, and I'm like, man, we'll kind of see where this goes. I just love sharing information. I love sharing my own unique perspective and how kind of I see things through my own lens. But yeah, that's kind of how it all started. And then I did my first Why series was Why David Montgomery. The reason I title it always Why Everything is really important for me. And like we talked about a little bit before the show, James, is just learning the details. right? It's the little things that make the biggest difference in sport, especially in a game as intricate and complex as American football. It's the details. It's why things are happening. And I've always been enamored with that ever since I was an athlete as well, was why do I move the way I move? Like, why am I not as fast as Tyreek Hill? Like those type of things, man. I've always wanted to know that, and I've been really nitpicky about that in my own career as well. So, yeah, that's been a big part of it, is just trying to learn more about why players are the way they are and how they kind of fit in the NFL today.
Okay. Well, I got one more question before we start diving into the top 3 wide receivers. But when you're doing evaluations, tell me, like, what positions are you currently, evaluating on your site and putting out information?
Awesome. So for me, the 2 positions I do the most work on that are on the side, I put up wide receivers and running backs, especially because for me, man, I try to do a lot of my work, and player evaluation with the fantasy spin as well. Because like I said, I play a lot of fantasy football, man. I've been playing it for the last decade or so. So for me, it's nice to kind of put that spin on it. And the biggest 2 positions I think to learn more about and kind of the meat of our fantasy teams are, our running backs and wide receivers. And I think quarterbacks are a little different in terms of evaluation. I think they're pretty, like, a lot of times it's draft capital that kind of drives like elite tier quarterbacks. If you're a first round quarterback, I mean, you've got to sift through some stuff. There's going to be a difference between Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence, but watching them, you kind of know what that is. Yeah. So I think that's a little different. But when you dive into running backs, especially guys like James Robinson, who was kind of unknown, but when you watched him at Illinois State, when I did a profile on him last year, you can kind of tell. I mean, this guy's different than some of the running backs that come out of the 1AA, so to speak. So, and that's the different thing, is just looking at them from that perspective of what can make them successful at the NFL level, how can they sustain success, and how are they going to catch the eye of NFL coaches. And like I said before too, like, how are they going to maintain that? And for our fantasy teams, that's a really important thing, is that consistency, that wins you leagues and championships.
Yeah. So, a little bit of background question. When you're evaluating, like, say, you've got Devonta Smith, Jaylen, Waddle and stuff. When you're doing this evaluation, are you only looking at this past season, or is there any consideration into the previous seasons?
So I try to watch film as early as I can get it, essentially. So I'll watch film from their freshman year, sophomore year on AGS, the Ascension grading system. One thing I'm doing, as well as the 2021 class grades and all that good stuff, is I'm starting for the 2023 class, giving film grades for each year until they declare into the NFL draft. So we can kind of see how they ascend, how they grow, in what ways. Is there a guy who played a little slower as a freshman that played a ton faster as a sophomore and junior, and we saw his yards per carry jump? Right. Or is there a guy who wasn't involved in the passing game as much as a freshman, but as a sophomore he caught 25 balls for like 400 yards? You know what I mean? So it's that type of thing that I look pretty deeply at. And when I looked at Devonta Smith in particular, he competed on the highest, the highest stage, the pinnacle of college football, and caught a touchdown. Like, I think it was the game-winning touchdown national championship game from Tua. Yeah, his freshman year. And so that's unique, because although Devonta Smith didn't like break out essentially as a freshman, he still made a big play on the biggest stage of college football. And that was the soonest that I saw of him. I'm like, kids that can make that play at 18, 19 years old, with the whole world watching, like, that's a really interesting starting point to a career, and to watch him. So that was when I kind of first had my eye on Devonta Smith, was when he made that play in the national championship game as a freshman.
The look off of the safety was elite too on that play. But all right, but before we get to Devonta Smith, let's start with, tell me a little bit about how your evaluation went of Jamaar Chase.
So for Jamaar Chase, I'll break it down for all these evaluations, kind of 3-pronged. So number one, I'm going to talk about him as a mover, how they act and react movement-wise. Number two, where they're at positionally in terms of what positional threat they pose to an NFL defense, where they're kind of at to for an offense. And then 3, kind of the dynasty value we're going to get from these guys too going forward. So for a guy like Chase, he's a pretty strict mover, doesn't really deviate much, very linear, not a very creative in terms of, movement wise, right? He's not Antonio Brown. He's not Stephon Diggs. That's not who he is. However, he has what we call like multi-dimensional physicality. He's physical at the line of scrimmage. He's physical in route. He's physical in the air, and he's physical after the catch. That is very rare to have all four of those things from a player. That's kind of what makes AJ Brown tick. He's a multi-dimensional physicality guy. He wins with that, and essentially that alone. I mean, he has a lot of other interesting traits Chase does, and the other one, he's a phenomenal aerial athlete. I mean, his inner athleticism is nearly second to none in this class. Him and Tylan Wallace are at the top of this class in terms of that category. But that's something that quarterbacks can rely on, is making adjustments in flight and adjusting to poorly thrown balls, underthrows, overthrows, and throws outside their frame. So that's something he does exceptionally well, and that's a hard trait to teach. For me, that's a trait. If you have it, I mean, it's an absolute, that's a monster point to have in your game is being an exceptional inner athlete and the ability to contort, adjust on any given play. In terms of him, like from analytics, the guy is a titanium analytic and athletic profile. Like it's extremely hard to poke a hole in him in terms of those two, those two aspects. He's a pretty raw athlete. I think we're seeing, I guess the worst he's going to be is right now. And that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
So that's the difference is for a guy like Chase is he is very raw. He's proven he can be pretty dang elite at 19 years of age, despite not having a ton to his toolbox at the line of scrimmage, not a super broad route tree as well. He's not a tactician either. He doesn't have the technical and tactical aspects yet of the game, but yet he's winning with, in a variety of different ways, in the air being one, and the second one, how physical he is in terms of being multidimensional in that facet. But yeah, I mean, for me, he's one of the best wide receivers in this class. You can make a case between him and Devonta Smith 1 and 2. In terms of what position Chase is going to play, he's going to be an X receiver, most likely. He'll move around some into the slot. But I think he'll be an alpha X, the number one target in NFL offense. He's going to be kind of the guy the offense flows through in the passing game. His dynasty value is going to be interesting, man, because you're probably going to have to take him in the top 6 of your dynasty drafts. If you play dynasty, that's going to be an interesting selection because I think he's also a guy that his value right now might be higher than it is a year from now. So you might be able to buy Chase stock, I guess at a lower rate than you would like in, let's say, October, November or something, because guys like we saw Jonathan Taylor last year when he went through that kind of lull in his rookie year. We saw with AJ Brown as well. That's a big buy low period. I think a guy like with Jamaar Chase, I mean, missing a full year, not having that advanced technical, tactical skill set and those tools, that combination leads me to believe that it might not be sunshine and roses, coming out of the gate like his teammate Justin Jefferson, who was a Pro Bowler as a rookie. And that's the difference is I think Chase is an all-pro caliber player. I think if he's a perennial all-pro or Pro Bowler, I'm not shocked in the least. But coming into his rookie year, I think he might start a little slow, which might kind of create that buy low period, like I said.
So my question is a couple of things. One is some people say that he relies on his physicality and his strength at the line of scrimmage, and my question is as an ex receiver, getting the other team's best DB, can he expect the same level of success in the NFL that he did in college? And I struggle with that. So I mean, sure. What is your thought on that? Because you mentioned he's not a tactician. Okay, not that he can't become one. But just right now he's not a tactician. So I think that there could be some struggles and growing pains there. And I think you kind of alluded to that as a buy low. But I think people have this mentality that Chase dominated in 2019. So week 1 of the NFL season, he's going to go out there and dominate. And I personally struggle with that. But what do you think?
No, I agree with you, James. I think it's one of those instances where he had so much success in college because, like I mentioned, the multidimensional physicality is a huge boon to his stock. I mean, this is the guy that lines up against the best DB, at any given play in college, and he's going to out-physical them, right? He's going to push them around. We saw him bully DBs for 4 quarters. That's not going to happen in the NFL. That you're going to have to win with variety. You can't be a one-trick pony and be a Pro Bowl caliber player in the NFL. That's not how it works. Even guys like DK Metcalf, who came into the league, as sort of that prototypical, 9-route deep threat, big, fast, strong. He's developed a ton of nuance in his short career. A.J. Brown the same, where he had that physicality early on in his career, and in college at Ole Miss, he's developed that into a broader skill set with more nuance to it. And I think that's the same thing we're going to see with Chase. It's going to take time. He's going to, we can afford him the opportunity to develop into a great player, which I think he will. It's just the question of when. If we want it now, he's not the guy you want to draft, in my opinion. If you want it immediately, no, it's not going to happen. Redraft, I would take Devonta Smith over Jamaar Chase, because I think Devonta Smith is the most complete receiver in this whole entire class and has the opportunity to, compete for 130 plus targets off the bat. Chase, I think, is going to have to work into that a little bit, but I think the ceiling for Chase is the moon.
So tell me this, because I struggle with this. And when I say I struggle with this, I just want to be clear. I think Chase is a supreme athlete. Okay, there's no question of that. But is it not at least a little concerning that, evaluations of Chase and everything basically relies on one single season? And it was a season where everything that could go right did go right, okay? Because LSU doesn't normally ever beat Alabama, okay? Right. They had Joe Brady. They had, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Justin Jefferson. Okay, you had Chase. You had Joe Burrow. Look, Joe Burrow was a nobody before 2019, okay? Nobody. And my thing is they got cooking and like everything, it was just magical. And, so it's just, to me, is there any, hesitation of, hey, we saw that and then no more? You know what I mean? Because you could say the same thing about Chase. His freshman year, nobody knew who he was. But sophomore year, everybody knew. So, is there any struggles with looking at players that just – they had that one hot year, and then I'm going to ride this 1 year straight to the NFL?
Man, that's a really good question. For me, that's when film comes in, like watching a lot of film comes into play. Analytics are fantastic. I use both film analytics on AGS, but that's when watching film comes into play. You have to when you watch that LSU offense in 2019, you're right. Burrow, Edwards-Helaire, Terrace Marshall, Joe Brady, Justin Jefferson. I mean, Thaddeus Moss was good. Like, that offense had some hitters. That's what you got to understand too. Is like that's an elite offense. He wasn't creating off of nothing. He didn't go to Alcorn State, right? No, he went to the best offense. The LSU offense was probably the best offense in the past decade of football and college football. But watching him play, he dominated the game with his physicality. I'm not unimpressed by less impressed by him having such a good supporting cast, but the NFL is going to be a learning curve for everybody. But I think him more so than others because of the fact that he missed one season and he was never realistically the focal point of his offense, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Justin Jefferson, Edwards-Helaire. Those two guys alone they contributed at a very high level. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just, Jamaar Chase. It wasn't the Jamaar Chase show. So it's definitely something to note. I don't think it hurts his profile any, but when you go into the NFL, like I said, the learning curve is steep enough that might mean as well, just a little bit, he might struggle a little early on, and that could be a part of it.
Okay. So, we've got Chase. Tell me, break down your evaluation on the one and only Jaylen Waddle, because I don't know if you've noticed or not lately. he is a pretty hot topic on Dolphins Twitter. So
Yeah.
tell me about Jaylen Waddle.
I think he falls in range for you guys too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the big thing is, he's going to be he's a hell of a player. I mean, we talk about Devin Hester. I'm a Chicago Bears fan. He is Devin Hester like in his ability to throttle up and down depending on the situation. That was a capability Devin Hester had that not many have in the NFL. It just be able to throttle up and down and just use his speed as an absolute weapon, not because his top end speed is so high. It's just he has an answer for every situation in terms of the angles that he's facing. That's why you want to get the ball in that man's hand as much as you possibly can. That's the only real question about Waddle is he going to be a Tyreek Hill type of receiver in terms of target share in an NFL offense? I don't have the answer to that. I think he is more like a Deshaun Jackson, where he can be the number one receiver in an offense. I think Jackson's best season in terms of targets was around 120. I think that would where I'd be surprised if Waddle had 120 targets in his rookie year, but I think that's kind of where the ceiling is. 100, I'd say around 105. If you have 105 targets in your Jaylen Waddle, it's pretty dang good. We're happy with that opportunity. But he's just the most dynamic playmaker in this class, man. He's abrupt. He's a quick and efficient mover. And in terms of position, he fits in the slot really well. I think allowing him to get space to operate is the best thing. And you'll get that space in the slot. Getting him the ball and manufactured touch is important. And he's going to really elevate a team special teams as well. That's going to be huge. He's going to be one of the league's best punt returners when he walks in the door. And he's a Pro Bowl, all pro level punt returner immediately. So how he impacts the game in short areas and how he can impact the game and change it on any touch. So for me, I think he's a surefire top 12 pick. I think we're going to see 3 receivers in the top 12 this year, Chase, Smith, and Waddle. I don't know what order they're going to go in, but it might be just those, might be just that Chase, then Smith, and Waddle. But he deserves to be a high-level NFL draft pick. My only really real hang-up is, he produced at a high level during this season before he got injured. We saw that. The ankle I'm a little concerned about in the near term. I think that's the reason why he didn't run routes at the Mac Jones Pro Day when Najee Harris and Devonta Smith ran around a little bit and caught some balls. But that's not anything, if you're in a redraft league, you might look at that. But in Dynasty, I'm going to consider that as another buy low. I believe in Waddle as a player long term, but the consistency, the efficiency in which he puts up fantasy points is going to be, I guess, another question mark. It might be like Deshaun Jackson. You see, 6 catches, 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. Next week, 1 catch on 5 targets for 18 yards. Like that. That's the tough thing is we might get that type of player because of where he wins. He's a 3rd level winner. He doesn't win as much on the 1st and 2nd level. But it's going to be really interesting to see where he fits in the NFL offense and who selects him.
See, I don't think anybody has any concerns about his speed outside of the ankle. But my question is like, because I have my own opinions, but I'm asking you, what are your thoughts of not just his speed, but his route running and that translation of how that translates day one NFL?
I think it depends on where he's going to be operating. I think he's going to operate more on the 3rd level where it's much more of a linear route tree. He's not, the breaks aren't as sharp. So I think he's going to be asked to run a similar route tree to what we saw with Will Fuller, where there's a lot of stuff deep. There's some stuff short and intermediate kind of tossed in there, but he physically, if he's 100% healthy, he's capable because he's a very good lateral mover. He can get in and out of breaks extremely quick. He's better than you think as a tactician, but it's just, is he going to be afforded the opportunity to showcase that? And it's just whatever role an NFL offense has him in is what he'll start off with, which is a blessing and a curse. But that's also the difficult thing is he's not a 3-level winner. He's not a multi-positional threat, I don't think. He's not going to win an XZ in the slot. So that's the tough thing is his environment, his ecosystem is going to really dictate, how he performs early on in his career until he can kind of branch out and refine his own skill set.
See, and this is why I like talking to people like you because, see, with me, now, I mean, I'm an Alabama fan. I've seen every snap Jaylen Waddle and Devonta Smith's ever taken. But at the same time, their freshman, sophomore, and Devonta Smith's junior year, I was looking at it just as a fan standpoint, was not active on social media, was not really, doing any analysis or anything like that. But my thing is, like, when you look at Jaylen Waddle, and this is where you've got to differentiate and you've got to use multiple things. Like you talked about, you use analytics and tape.
Mm-hmm.
Like Jaylen Waddle's production. I mean, I did an analysis on I think there were 16 wide receivers, excluding Tyreek Hill, and I'll tell you why in a second, that received 1,000 yards this year. Okay. And I excluded Tyreek Hill because his college stats are harder to find with him not being D1. Okay. But of the 16 others, I want to say all but 2 of them had 1,000-yard seasons in college. And most of them, I think 7 of them, had multiple 1,000-yard receivings in college.
Right.
Jaylen Waddle had the lowest production in college of any NFL wide receiver this past season, if you compared college to college.
Right.
So, my thought process on Waddle is I think he's either, and this is just opinion, is I think he's riskier because of where his skill set is because I think it's going to be boom or with that. And because I think when you look at his production in college and compare it to those 1K guys in the NFL, if he does boom, he's a unicorn. I mean, when you look at, he's an outlier when it comes to the stats. You know what I mean?
Right.
Comparing college to college. And a lot of people go back to, well, Jaylen Waddle was killing Devonta Smith before he got injured, and that's false. Jaylen Waddle had 74 more yards than Devonta Smith when he got injured in the first play of Tennessee game. And they both had 4 touchdowns at the same time. So, I mean, there was a difference, but it wasn't this Grand Canyon-sized gap that, a lot of the Jaylen Waddle stands, want you to believe. And then it's like, but what about the 2019 season? Jaylen Waddle was a 500-yard guy in the 2019 season, while you had, Judy over 1,000, you had Devonta Smith over 1,000. Okay, I think Jaylen Waddle is in my own opinion, tell me if you agree, a much better prospect than Ruggs. But I don't think that he's at the same level as Devonta Smith, but that's just me personally.
Yeah. Oh, I actually agree with you. I think I like Ruggs a lot coming out too, but more so in that third level only type role. I think he offered more in the contested catch category than people gave him credit for. But with Waddle, there's much more laterally than Ruggs had. But you're right. The production, if he does, if he has a top 12 NFL season in terms of fantasy, he's a unicorn. He's an outlier. That doesn't happen for guys whose best receiving season, I think, is under 700 yards in college. Obviously, he would have had about 1,500, 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns or so, which has been a massive season if he would have stayed healthy. But that's the thing. It's a lot of what ifs. There's a lot of what ifs in his profile, which is fine with where you're probably going to be drafting him around that I'd say 108 to 112 range, where you might want to take that shot because the booms are going to be huge. Like I said, like Will Fuller, good week, huge. So if you're chasing that, man, that's great. But guys like Devonta Smith, when you look at him, well, he's going to have his floor in the NFL once he gets going and acclimated to an NFL offense might be like 8 for 60. Still not a bad week, right? We look at some of these guys who are multi-positional, multi-level threats like Stephon Diggs, even like Deontay Johnson, for crying out loud. Like their bad weeks are 5 for 72. It's not going to kill you. But like if you're Jaylen Waddle, he's gonna have those weeks where he's like 2 for 20. And it's like, man, that stinks. Like you don't, like, dynasty manager, like that's the stuff that drives you nuts. But that's what you might be getting with a guy like Jaylen Waddle is those super high highs, those week winning highs, but the week losing lows.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive into, I mean, it's no secret to anybody, that may be watching or on Twitter. Devonta Smith is my personal favorite. I've told you and told everybody I'm an Alabama fan. And, you win the national championship game as a freshman. I mean, you've wrote your story. Okay. And then what I don't think people just realize, they think, oh, well, he blew up in 2020, but no, he blew up in 2019. Okay. I mean, when he out-received Jerry Jeudy and Ruggs. Okay. Jeudy struggled with a lot of drops this year, but he still finished over 800 yards, which is higher than any Miami Dolphins wide receiver this year in yards. And Jeudy had an entire game where he had a non-quarterback, at quarterback
Right,
who threw for 21 yards in the entire game. Okay. So Jerry Jeudy didn't have a terrible season. He needs to shore up the drops, but he's a tactician, and Devonta Smith held his own with him. And I don't know, a lot of people get into this and it's with a Chase thing and a Waddle thing. With me, look, is it a talking point? Yes, but I just don't buy, well, this guy was a sophomore. He did it as a sophomore. Well, that guy did it as a junior. So and they're acting like he's 65 years old or something. I just don't see, that big of a difference. But, break down my man Devonta Smith for me.
Man, the number one thing that I look at when I watch Devonta Smith, he's always in control. I mean, he is the most efficient, technically sound receiver that I've seen coming out of college in a very long time. And that's what truly stands out. I mean, coming from me being having a track background, the efficiency is the difference between your elite level 200-meter runners and your just mediocre ones. And he has that type of efficiency to where it is so hard for a defensive back to dictate and understand what he's doing on a given play. He has so many ways to win. And when you just turn on the tape and watch him play against LSU against Derek Stingley Jr., who's going to be the next best cornerback prospect in the 2022 class.
He owes him some child support.
Had him on a string the whole game because he's just always in control. He's always in the driver's seat. He has an answer for everything a defense and a defensive back throws at him. When he understands how to manipulate coverages, and he just plays the game from a cognitive and a mental standpoint at an exceptionally high level. As a mover, when you watch him on bubble screens, you have to appreciate the curvilinear movement skills he has. I mean, he's just one of those guys where he just bends it back, and like at the Notre Dame game, when he caught that bubble, and I'm like, oh man, 8-yard game, 35 yards later, it's a touchdown. And that's the type of player he is. He can score on any touch from anywhere on any level of the field. He's just the most efficient player that I have come across in quite some time from a movement standpoint. And he marries that with an exceptional between-the-ears skill set that is extremely rare for a player of his age. He can play, like I said, from a positional threat standpoint, X, Z in the slot. He can, take a jet touch to the house. He can, win a jump ball in the end zone. He's an unreal red zone threat too. I mean, he scored 47 touchdowns in 47 games. Like, this is not just your 170-pound 9-route guy. Like, this isn't Marquise Brown we're talking about here. Like, this is a highly productive scorer of the football. And he's just uber efficient in an abundance of areas. Man, he reminds me a lot of Stephon Diggs. The way they win in all three levels. They're the focal point of an NFL offense. And they're going to be guys who are going to be doing it for years because of how skilled they are. And like Antonio Brown, when he was with the Steelers, same thing. Like, didn't have the size. Antonio Brown came into college at like 5'10", 155, which is hilarious, right? But you watch Antonio Brown throughout his career, and you see those guys, and they talk, especially on like podcasts, things like that. You get them on interviews, and Antonio Brown played around 180, 175, 180. You see Chad Johnson saying he played at 170. Justin Jefferson played his rookie year around 189 to 193, and he weighed in at 202 at the combine. And that's the thing I think people don't understand as much of is, in my experience, like my weight deviated a ton from my college career. Like I started, I was small as hell coming out of high school. It was like mid 140s. Then I got like to 180. Then I ran around like 165 to 168. Devonta Smith probably weighed in around like 170, and he plays around 175, plays around 168 to 170. But one thing we have to look at is Dr. Matthew Rhea, who's the director of sports science, one of the best sports science minds in the whole entire world, is out here telling us that Devonta Smith is functionally strong. There's no worry about his durability at the NFL level. When a guy in a field very similar to mine tells me that I am not worried about this guy because he's functionally strong, he's durable, he's a great mover who understands contact and the varieties of those, great. I'm sold. That's a misnomer. I'm not gonna dive into, guys who've succeeded at 170 when Devonta Smith's like the director of sports science who's worked with him, who's one of the smartest men in the world at what he does, is telling us it's not an issue. And we spend too much time picking apart a player's profile like Smith because of one thing. Well, two things. One being the BMI, the weight, and two, because he was a senior and did it. Oh, he had a pretty elite junior year too. What he had on, who his like mates were in his receiving room. Like
people were shocked he didn't come out at Alabama.
I was too. I mean, I had him pegged for a mid first round pick. I thought it was gonna be around 20 to 25. That's what my thought was when he was gonna come out, because I thought he was a dang good football player. But now, it's very rare to see guys elevate their stock that much from like mid 20s who are already a first round pick to people are cementing him in the top 12 now, which is crazy, he deserves it. But yeah, it's just one of those interesting things where not enough is talked about how he acts and reacts as a player, but there's a lot of talk about, him being smaller and slighter build, and him, having a breakout season. He scored 23 touchdowns and over 1,800 yards as a senior. I don't care if you do that if you're 65. Like that's it. That's impressive, man. That is almost uncharted territory in college football. Especially this year, they didn't play any cupcakes. Like this is the schedule with COVID was so different that you're not playing your Appalachian states. You know what I mean? So that's the thing that's crazy, man. He did this playing against some of the best corners in the nation on a week-to-week basis, especially after Jaylen Waddle went down. The Devonta Smith show. I mean, Mechie's no joke. I like him as a prospect, but it was Devonta Smith and Najee Harris. That was it. That was it. So it was crazy to watch, man. I mean, those defenses put their best guy in him. J.C. Horn, best cornerback in this class, in my opinion. Nope, no dice. Derek Stingley Jr., no dice. Sean Wade was supposed to be an AP All-American.
Oh.
Enjoy the first half of the national championship game, man.
And he asked for Devonta.
That was the funniest part. I remember that interview. I was watching that interview. I was sitting on my couch, and I'm like, oh, no. This might not end well. And, we saw if it wasn't for the dislocated finger, Devonta Smith would have hung 300 plus and like 5 touchdowns in a national championship game.
He would have finished with over 2K yards. Like at halftime, I was already counting the yards. Like, okay, he needs 146 more yards. But first of all, I want to touch on some of the things you said. I want to point out a lot of people aren't as into Alabama because they've got ties to Miami. But I just want to point out, you mentioned the health department and the training there at Alabama. This was their first year there, okay? The previous regime, I'm just going to be honest with you, every year before the season started, the past 3 or 4 years, there were 4, 5, 6 at times ACL tears right before the season started. I mean, every single season, okay? That staff leaves and goes to Georgia, okay? Georgia has a rash of ACL tears this year. And then Alabama goes through the entire season, and the only major injury is they had Landon Dickerson there, in the SEC championship game or but So from a medical standpoint, this was a much better year for Alabama than any previous years. And it's because, they brought in 2 guys, to run the strength and conditioning program. Okay. I think one guy is more of a weights and body movement, and one guy is more of a analytics and numbers guy of how it reflects, with strengths and stuff like that. And they've been a great pairing in Alabama thus far. And then, you mentioned the 23 touchdowns, and I've actually got it pulled up. Single season, okay, touchdown holders in a single season for receivers. Devonta Smith just finished the 5th most receiving touchdowns in NCAA history. And, some of those people on the list, Randy Moss, 26. Okay, Devontae Adams at number 4 with 24. Devonta Smith, 23. Michael Crabtree, 22. Larry Fitzgerald, 22. Okay. And yes, at 10, Jamaar Chase with 20 from 2019. But, that's pretty elite company, you know what I mean, to be in. I don't care if you're a junior, freshman, sophomore, what year you're in. It's pretty elite company. But speaking to Devonta Smith, I think it was funny to me because if you watch the pro day where he ran some of those routes, I saw some people post videos, and it may have even been you. And then somebody, beneath it was like, "Is this in fast forward?"
Yes. Well,
yeah. He is so smooth and I'm not talking about he's a 4.2 speed or anything like that, but like his movement is so smooth. It always looks like he's gliding.
Yeah, man, just effortless.
It is incredible.
Just effortless, man. He's just one of those guys where nerds like me, man, I just sit and just replay because I'm like even like for me, man, I don't see this is crazy. This is unprecedented. A guy who is that smooth, that fluid, and moves that fast. He's a 10.6, 700-meter guy, 44 plus feet in the triple jump. Under 50 seconds in the quarter mile. Exceptional athlete. But watching like that on the field of play, it was funny because Mac Jones could not overthrow him if he tried. I won't talk about my Mac Jones takes, but
yeah,
but man, the amount of times Devonta Smith had to reach back for the ball or make plays in the air because he was underthrown speaks a lot to his speed. People thought his speed was going to be, people were excited to see him run the 40 because, they thought he was running the 4.5s. It doesn't matter because defensive backs, Derek Stingley Jr. is probably going to be a low 4.4, high 4.3 guy. J.C. Horn was a 4.38 guy. They can't stick with him down the field. But there's a reason for that. His play speed and what he does on the field is just so unique, and the way in which he goes about it with that fluidity and control is just awesome to watch, man.
So before I ask you about the rankings and we close up, I want to go through these guys, and I'm going to try to take some of the information you gave me, and some of it's going to be an inflection of my own opinion, and you tell me how far off the mark I am. Okay? I think Jamaar Chase is an absolutely phenomenal athlete. I think the way he gets open, if you want to call it his route tree, the way he gets open, I think is at this moment limited because he's got to try to bully people, and I think it's going to be more difficult to do that in the NFL. I could see him, having those lulls like you talked about. And I would also perceive him to be in the bottom 50% of the NFL in separation. I think it's going to make it difficult for young QBs to throw to him because I absolutely hate, and I'm not saying that this is all he is, before people start coming after me. But, the 50-50 balls, I just want to shake people and say, you do realize that 50-50 means that it's 50% chance of getting intercepted. And I'd prefer not to have, that high of a chance of getting intercepted. And I also think that, if it's 50-50 balls, it's the quarterback's job to get you the ball, but it should be part of your job to actually get open. So I think there's a shared responsibility there. Now, red zone and stuff like that, different. And it's great to have a guy that can do that. Okay, absolutely no denying that. But, I think if that's your biggest or one of your biggest, or best traits, then I think it's, we need to work on getting open, work on your feet, your release, and getting to that point. So with Jamaar Chase, how far off the mark am I?
Not very. I think he'll develop some of that nuance. I think with the year off, it kind of works for and against him. I think it works for him because you get to work on all the weaknesses. Works against him because you don't get to work on those in game. So I think he can develop that. The question is how quickly. Is he limited right now? Yeah, he absolutely is. But so is AJ Brown, so is DK Metcalf. But we also have to be a little more patient with some of those guys too, right? Before they became who they are today. So I don't think that's off the mark or off base at all. I think it's fairly spot on. And just we have to afford Chase some time to develop.
Yeah. And see, and another thing that I have to tell people on social media is like, if I tell you an opinion, it's not like I've made this opinion, it can never change, and this player is always this in my mind. It's just like I'm just looking at this, this season or where they are now. So Jaylen Waddle, with me, I think Jaylen Waddle, elite speed, and we mentioned it, and I'll talk about Jaylen Waddle the least because we sort of went into it, but I think that I would like to see. I would have liked to see more production from Jaylen Waddle. People talk about, well, he was a year behind. Well, I get that, but you do realize Devonta Smith was battling 2 first-round wide receivers at the same time in 2019 and managed to get on the field, managed to get his targets, and managed to finish more yards. So I think he was a year behind to me is it's 2 playing the victim or 2, making excuses. I'd have liked to see a little bit more production from Waddle. Absolutely, he was on track to have a phenomenal year this year. I'm not saying that. But it's, again, a what if. What would have happened if he'd have stayed healthy. But I think he's got elite speed. And, and I mentioned it, it's my own personal, I think, you're going to see the highest of highs in the NFL, or you're going to see, from him. I don't think that there's a huge in between, with those, with Jaylen Waddle. So, with that, how far off, am I out with Jaylen Waddle?
Again, I think a lot of it for him, it depends on where he lands. His environment, his ecosystem is going to be the most important out of the 3 guys we're talking about tonight. Because he needs a team that likes to go vertical. There isn't, a question about that. I would like to see him, honestly, the dream spot is Los Angeles Chargers. I think at 13, they're kind of in range. I think Waddle's going to be picked in the top 12. I think it's going to go Chase, then Smith, then Waddle. I think Smith will go at 7. Chase, I still don't know. I think trade-ups are going to happen in that first 5. So it's going to be a little hard to predict Chase. But 6 to Miami. You guys are 6, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 6 to Miami makes sense, even though I think Devonta Smith's the better fit there because of how he wins. But that's this or that, whatever. I think Chase is still a great player. But Waddle's interesting because he needs that system fit. Chase and Smith can operate on their own. Chase might take him a little bit of time, but Smith can go to all 32 teams and be fine. But that's the tough thing about Waddle, man, is he needs a quarterback that can push the ball down the field. He needs an offensive corner that's going to be creative with him and let him showcase the versatility that he does have. So those are kind of the questions I have that I think a lot of people do. It's just, when are we going to see that happen, man? Hopefully on draft night we get some good news and he goes to the Chargers. That's my hope for him.
And then lastly, Devonta Smith. I think Devonta Smith is – I think he's got a mix of both. I think he's much faster than people believe, which is more like Waddle. I think Devonta Smith has real talent at jump balls or 50-50 balls like Chase. It may not be to the extent of Chase, but I've got a highlight reel I'm putting out tomorrow for Smith, and it was surprisingly how many of those are jump balls where he's putting himself in position. So I think that he can do that at a high level. But I also think that, the one thing that sort of is different than the other guys is, his flexibility. You mentioned, in the slot, out wide. Okay, it doesn't matter. he is a technician, you know what I mean, with his feet and getting releases, and his route tree, I think, is much deeper and more refined than the other guys. And I think that while while he may not be as good a 50-50 ball guys chase, he may not be as fast as Jaylen Waddle, but he's a lot closer than people think on those aspects than the others, and his route tree and how technical he is leaps and bounds, you know what I mean, above the others. So that's what sort of tips the scale, in my opinion. So, what do you say about that?
I think that's a good point. I think when you brought up the jump balls, the contested catches, I think the one thing you have to go back to is I think it was the Mississippi State game when he was up against in the red zone, like Israel Mukuamu. Well, he's a 6'4", 205-pound corner. So no chance against Devonta Smith. I mean, it's just one of those situations where you have to expect and appreciate his ability as a leaper.
Yeah.
Fantastic in-air athlete. I mean, he's one of those guys that, like I said, wins at all three levels, wins at versatility. He's a physical football player, even though he's only 170 pounds, willing blocker, but he does everything really well. And that's what the NFL organization is going to really appreciate about him. So it's just the question of where's he going to land. I think he's going to have success wherever he lands. I would like to see Detroit at 7 so he can be the face of that receiving core for years to come. And I think they do need weapons with, Rashad Perriman's their best receiver, Quintez Cephas, like Tyrell Williams. I mean, that's kind of what they have right now. And TJ Hawkinson, obviously DeAndre Swift too. But Jared Goff needs weapons to throw to, and I think he's the number one fit there for that offense. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just, will people kind of see that too late? Because I think the kid's going to be a star in the NFL.
Yeah, I was watching, and it was surprising because, and like I said, I saw him live, but I guess you just get caught up in the moment. But like, he's got, the 50-50 ball catch against Derek Stingley, in the end zone at LSU. He had the one you mentioned against Mississippi State. He had one at Texas A&M, and he had one at Georgia too, this year. So it was when I went back, I guess I was sort of surprised at how many of the 50-50 balls that he get, because most people just see, well, he's just running wide open all day. Nobody's pressing him. They're 10 yards off the line, and it's like that's not always, the case. But all right, so man, as we wrap up first. And I think you sort of exceed, you told us, but I'm not talking about draft, but I'm just talking about overall talent. Rank these guys 1, 2, 3.
Ceiling?
Well, as where they are right now, like if right now you're playing ball out at the, on the playground, which one's the, who you picking first, who you picking second, third, not where they're going to go in the draft or the best fit for the teams, but just best talent right now.
I'll do it like this. If I'm an NFL GM and I'm trying to win a championship right now, I'm taking Devonta Smith. Okay. If I want to win a championship in a few years, I think I'm a few years away. I want a guy to develop. I'm taking Jamaar Chase. If I need that vertical threat to open up everything else in my offense, I'm taking Jaylen Waddle. So it's really situational because these guys are all exceptional receivers. The lowest I have any of them ranked is Jaylen Waddle, and he's a Pro Bowl caliber player. Like that, these are all Pro Bowl plus guys. So that's what you're going to get with all three of them, in my opinion. I mean, for me personally, if I want the more NFL ready guy, I'm going to take Devonta Smith. He's the one I think that has the best of the more holistic profile. In that sense, where he does everything really well. There isn't anything he doesn't do well on the field of play. And he's the guy that, for me personally, I like him the best out of any receiver in this draft.
All right. So now, and I'm going to ask you about expectations. And I dug up some information, and I'm just scanning right here to see, because I'm one of those guys, I hate to misquote something. I'm one of those, if I'm going to say something, I like to have everything absolutely perfect. But here's my questions. Before I ask you about, here it is. All right, before I ask you about expectations for year one, I just want to point out, and this is one thing that scares me with all three of these guys. It's not a huge sample size, just the last 2 years. Okay. The last 2 years, each year, there's only been one rookie wide receiver that has gained 1,000 yards receiving. Okay. And to be honest with you, when you look at the top 3 rookie receiving leaders in 2020 and 2019, none of them were the first or second wide receivers taken off the board. Okay, in 2019, you had A.J. Brown, 1,000 yards, 1,051, fourth wide receiver drafted. Then you had, Terry McLaurin, 11th wide receiver drafted. DK Metcalf, 9th wide receiver drafted. This past season, Justin Jefferson, 5th wide receiver taken. He had 1,400 yards. Then you had CeeDee Lamb, 3rd wide receiver, and then T. Higgins, the 7th wide receiver taken. So my question is everybody thinks that, all 3 of these guys are going to come in and put up, 1,200 yards receiving next year. And I'm like, if that happens, it's going to be truly special because, when you look at the past seasons, that typically has not happened. So, with that saying, what are your, rough ballpark numbers, expectations for these guys in year one?
Oh, I think the lowest yards total will probably go to Waddle. I'd say Waddle's around 750. I think that's still pretty good. It's a damn good season, right? I think Chase is pretty close and is around 875 to 925. And I think Devonta Smith has 1,100 yards.
Okay. That's a lot more exact than I would have thought. Okay.
That's kind of how I have it pegged now. I could see, depending on where he lands, if he lands in Detroit, it might be more than 1,100 because they have nothing on that offense. That defense is not great either. So they're going to be playing a negative script a ton. When you project a guy like Chase, let's say if Chase lands with the Miami Dolphins, they're going to be a neutral to positive script for a lot of the game. Great defense, good offense with a lot of weapons now, especially if they take Najee Harris at 18. That offense is going to elevate a little bit with Tua in his second year, but they're going to be a neutral to positive script. Waddle, if he plays with if let's say he goes to the Chargers, they're going to be in neutral script a lot of the time. But he would benefit from a negative script team too, especially in early career. So that's what depends. It depends a lot on. The Vikings defense this year was terrible. A lot of injuries. But Justin Jefferson lit it up. They're playing from behind a lot. Kirk Cousins had to air it out. But he's a fantastic, exceptional receiver. So I think we could see a similar season, with the Detroit Lions and Devonta Smith because they're going to be playing catch up a ton if that's the case. He gets drafted there.
All right, I only got one more question for you, but I promised that I was going to ask you this. I do an audio podcast with my man, Jeremy Klump, or most people know him as the Nutty Professor. Okay, our pod man-to-man coverage, and he told me to ask you. Okay, and just so I don't misquote this, because he was pretty adamant. Okay, but he was ask him about who told him that Justin Jefferson was going to be a dude in the NFL.
Oh, it's actually really funny. So I went back. I saw him say that. I went back and looked, and he said that. But it's funny because I pulled it up actually. So right here in my profile of Justin Jefferson, we kind of agreed the exact same on where he's at. So I said in 2019 on the website, I said Jefferson has as much upside as Keenan Allen as a pure slot receiver, but Jefferson's ability to move around and win at all 3 levels that has him coming into the league with Pro Bowl level contribution. That's what I said. So I don't know who agreed with who.
Okay.
So you could tell Klump that, but nah, man. He reached out to me last year after my Jefferson profile, and said that he loves him, and I'm like, me too, man. The dude's a baller, and I think he's gonna come into the league and be a Pro Bowler right away in the right fit. But yeah, man, that was funny. So I literally scrolled back through it. I'm like, I gotta dig up the Justin Jefferson profile on the website now and see what I said.
Yeah. All right, man. So you're familiar. You do a lot of fantasy and stuff. You're familiar with the Dolphins wide receivers, okay?
Sure.
They were quite a struggle last year, okay? You've got Devonta Parker, okay? You had Preston Williams, who cannot, for some reason, stay healthy to save his life, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You had two other guys, okay, opt out who may or may not be on the team this coming up year. Then you had guys like Matt Collins, and you had Grant, okay, poor little, Jakeem, who's got 1,000 yards in 5 or 6 years total, trying to catch balls. So it's been a struggle bus, okay. Not to mention, extremely young offensive line, extremely young quarterback. Okay, so with that being said, and you sort of know where Miami's at right now. We hope to be able to maintain a similar level of defense next year. Okay, got a lot of draft capital. Okay, but to be honest with you, you got pick 6. But after pick 6, I don't know any of these, unless something crazy happens, like a video with a gas mask or something.
Sure.
I don't think any of these guys are going to be available at 18. So you tell me, tonight you got promoted to the GM of the Miami Dolphins. Okay, you're now on the clock with pick 6. Okay, and just for intensive purposes, I'm an offensive line guy, but just for the practices of this, you've got to pick a wide receiver. Who's your guy? Who you writing down on the card?
I think for their particular situation, I'm taking Devonta Smith. They need a guy who can move around. They need a guy who's going to be an easy target for Tua and help elevate his game. I think with Chase, it's going to be a little tougher because he has to grow as well, right? He has a lot of growing to do, but he's going to be an awesome player. Like I said, man, the moon's a ceiling for Jamaar Chase. But the Dolphins are pretty much in win now mode in the near future, in my opinion. I mean, they're building a great nucleus over there with Flores, and that their whole staff is fantastic. And I think the best fit is Devonta Smith for me.
All right. Well, tell everybody once again how they can reach you on Twitter, and also, man, plug your website, because if nobody has seen it, I'm telling you, man, this guy is absolutely a beast mode. We were talking about it pre-show. When you look at his analysis on his website, most of the time you read draft analysis or evaluations, and it's 500 words. Okay, this guy has got clipped videos. Okay, that most time you don't even have to hit play. Just when you get down to it, it automatically starts playing for you over and over on a loop, and then you can read a paragraph, and then it goes to the next trait and shows another video. So it is absolutely beautiful. Tell them where they can reach that, man.
Yeah, first, man, thanks for having me on, James. I really appreciate it. Appreciate you reaching out to me. But you guys can find me on angeloanalysis.com. That's the website. Like James said, there's a lot of player profiles up there. The one I did recently was why Tylan Wallace. And then we have the whole crew up there with Chase, the guys we talk about tonight, Chase, Smith. We have, past years, with Waddle this year, Judy. We have Justin Jefferson from last year too. All those are up on the website. The 2020 ones are all free. So if you're like, man, I want to take a look at his work, but don't want to go behind the paywall, no big deal, man. Just go over and check out the Justin Jefferson one, or the Jonathan Taylor one, or the Jerry Judy one, or all the others that are up on the website. And you guys can find me if you have any questions, man. Just feel free to chop me up, and in the DMs, man. They're always open. It's at Angelo_fantasy on Twitter. But yeah, if you guys have any questions about anything, feel free to hop in. Toss me a question about your dynasty teams, or just pop in to say, hey, I have questions about this profile or whatnot. But always happy to answer, and always happy to to listen and to get some feedback.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate everybody that watched this tonight live, and it will be up on YouTube for anybody who missed it. So if you're watching this at a later date, I appreciate it. Leave us a like, comment, and until next time, man, fins up.